The truth about Tom Cruise and his daughter has finally surfaced, and it's more startling than anyone imagined. For years, fans speculated about the distance between them, Tom and his miracle baby, but the story behind their fractured bond is finally coming to light, and people have mixed reactions. What really drove a wedge between father and daughter? And how will this revelation reshape the way the world sees Tom Cruise? Join us as we uncover the secrets his daughter has quietly held for years. Childhood in the shadows. For more than 10 years, the world quietly watched as one of Hollywood's most recognized fathers slowly drifted away from his only daughter in the worst way possible. Unfortunately, the story is far more complicated than anyone expected, and it shows a side of Tom that not everyone gets to see. Their story began like a cinematic script when Tom Cruise and Katie Holmes first met in 2005. The connection was immediate and mutual, capturing headlines before it could even grow. At 26, Katie was a rising actress, radiant from her success on Dawson's Creek, exuding charm and youthful ambition. Tom, who was already 43 at the time, was a global superstar carrying the weight of blockbuster hits like Top Gun, Jerry Maguire, and The Mission Impossible franchise. His name alone drew crowds and headlines worldwide. For Katie, it wasn't just another Hollywood crush that would wither with time. Years earlier, she had told 17 magazine that marrying Tom was a dream. What seemed a playful fantasy suddenly edged into reality. Reports suggest that when Tom first saw her, he declared to his team, "I'm going to marry her." Within weeks, the impossible became inevitable. Their chemistry was immediate and palpable, drawing cameras and public attention wherever they went. They were photographed laughing together in Rome, seemingly lost in their own world, oblivious to onlookers. Even Tom, known for his private nature, appeared visibly swept up by emotion. The world collectively gasped when Tom appeared on the Oprah Winfrey Show, leaping on the couch to proclaim, "I'm in love." The moment divided opinions. Some saw it as romantic, others as peculiar, but no one could ignore it. On April 18, 2006, their daughter Suri arrived, instantly becoming the symbol of their whirlwind romance. Tom described her birth as the happiest day of his life, repeatedly calling her a miracle. Yet even this defining moment was influenced by the personal beliefs that shaped his life and decisions, setting the stage for a complex father-daughter dynamic that would unfold in silence for years. Now, as Suri steps into adulthood, the choices she makes and the distance she maintains reflect a childhood shaped by fame, secrecy, and control. But how did she get here? And what circumstances pulled her family into a world so far removed from ordinary life? Tom and Katie's whirlwind romance. Katie Holmes, a Catholic schoolgirl from Toledo, suddenly found herself thrust into a world far removed from her familiar life. At just 26, she was navigating pregnancy under intense public scrutiny. While following the strict traditions of Scientology series Birth, for example, adhered to the church's silent birth practice, where no one was allowed to speak in the room during delivery. Tom took his involvement further, purchasing a personal sonogram machine so he could monitor the pregnancy from home. Outsiders saw this as extreme, even obsessive, but to Tom, it was a demonstration of devotion and love. That November, Katie and Tom got married in a ceremony that resembled a page from a royal magazine. The event took place at the 15th-century Odescalchi Castle in Bracciano, Italy, reportedly costing over $3 million. Katie wore a Giorgio Armani gown, Tom radiated pride, and the guest list sparkled with celebrities, including Jennifer Lopez, Will Smith, and the Beckhams. Yet beneath the surface of glamour and opulence, tensions simmered. Katie's parents, devout Catholics, were uneasy, worried about the intense, unfamiliar world now shaping their daughter and granddaughter. What appeared to be a fairy tale quickly revealed its darker undertones. The couple's lifestyle became increasingly controlled, private, and deeply influenced by beliefs, secrecy, and authority. Tom believed every choice was guided by love and protection, but for Katie, the intense control began to feel like isolation. For Siri, these early years were the beginning of a very abnormal childhood, far from the ordinary experiences of her peers. Siri grew up in an environment where every step was orchestrated and observed. Public appearances were carefully managed, and personal interactions filtered through layers of protection. While the world saw a smiling, glamorous family, the reality behind closed doors was starkly different. From her earliest moments, Siri's life was shaped by rules and traditions beyond her understanding, as well as the invisible pressures of fame and expectation. By the time she reached her teenage years, the distance between father and daughter had quietly widened. Tom, preoccupied with both career and belief, remained an influential figure in her life, yet one whose presence was often formal and controlled. Katie, increasingly aware of the pressures surrounding her, began to step back, leaving Siri to navigate the complexities of her upbringing largely on her own. But how could a family that seemed flawless to the world hide such invisible cracks beneath its glittering facade? The glittering facade of fame. By 2007, Tom and Katie Holmes's bond appeared untouchable. From the outside, they embodied a Hollywood dream. Red carpets, private jets, magazine covers, all perfectly choreographed to the public, they were flawless. The superstar actor, his radiant wife, and their picture-perfect daughter, Suri. Yet behind the polished veneer, cracks were forming, invisible to the cameras but palpable to those close enough to notice. Friends and observers realized Katie rarely ventured out alone. Each outing was accompanied by silent, watchful figures connected to Tom's inner circle, often linked to Scientology. These quiet shadows tracked her every move, ensuring that nothing went unseen. Even during casual dinners, the tension was noticeable. Journalist Maureen Orth once observed an exchange with fans. Katie smiled politely but said, "Oh, we don't go outside very much." On the surface, it seemed benign, but to anyone aware of the rigid structures surrounding her, it was a stark indication of the constraints on her life. Meanwhile, Tom remained an unyielding presence. Confident, magnetic, and intensely committed to his beliefs, he had become one of Scientology's most prominent public figures. He promoted the Celebrity Center and defended the organization against critics, integrating its tenets into his public persona. To him, Scientology offered discipline, structure, and purpose, a framework that defined both his professional and personal life. For Katie, however, the same walls felt suffocating. The freedom she once knew was replaced by an invisible but unyielding framework she could never fully navigate. Her parents, Martin and Kathleen Holmes, observed from the sidelines, increasingly concerned about the pressures surrounding their daughter and granddaughter. Suri's childhood unfolded under these controlled circumstances. From the moment she was born, her life was shaped by rules and observation. Every appearance, interaction, and movement was curated, leaving little room for ordinary experiences. While the world saw glamour and perfection, Suri's reality was defined by constraint and secrecy. The celebrity facade masked a more complex, restrictive environment that few outsiders could understand. For Tom, the devotion to his family and beliefs was intertwined with his desire to protect and guide. For Katie, it became a delicate balancing act, navigating both public expectations and private pressures. And for Suri, the influence of these forces would define her formative years, shaping a childhood unlike any other. By the late 2000s, the image of a perfect family remained intact for public consumption, but the dynamics behind the scenes had shifted. The bond between them was already severed, and the tension between freedom and control, love and duty, became an undercurrent that quietly influenced every choice. As Suri grew older, her autonomy and identity began to emerge, an expression of self that reflected both her parents' influence and the limitations imposed on her life. Could the very system meant to protect her also be the force pushing her toward independence? Planning the escape. Katie Holmes' parents, lifelong Catholics, had always been uneasy about the strict, secretive world that their granddaughter was growing in visits, that once came with warmth, slowly became sporadic, constrained by the distance that seemed to grow around Suri. Friends noticed subtle changes in Katie. She started sounding almost rehearsed, repeating the same lines about Tom. "He's amazing. He's wonderful." As if convincing herself of a reality she no longer fully embraced. The bright, spontaneous spark that had defined her personality gradually dimmed. Meanwhile, Tom Cruise's adopted children with Nicole Kidman, Bella and Connor were already deeply embedded in Scientology. For Tom, it seemed natural that Suri would follow the same path, but Katie struggled with the idea of surrendering that level of control over her daughter's upbringing. She didn't fully understand the structures guiding Suri's life, and the rigidity of the system clashed with her instincts as a mother. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Katie began to pull back. She made careful choices, avoiding confrontations while quietly reclaiming small pieces of autonomy. By 2010, rumors began circulating in Hollywood. Katie felt trapped. She skipped certain church events, reconnected with friends from her past, and started spending more time in New York, away from Tom's tightly regimented schedule. To outsiders, it might have looked like drifting, but behind the scenes, she was methodically gathering information, assessing risks, and planning. Every move was deliberate. Every step was calculated. She knew the stakes were high and that a misstep could change everything. By 2011, the cracks in the facade were impossible to ignore. Katie's public smiles looked tighter, her gestures more guarded. Those who had once glimpsed a fairy tale family now began to sense the tension beneath the polished surface. Every time she held Suri's hand a little tighter, it was clear she was already laying the groundwork for a larger plan. One that would eventually redefine their lives and challenge the carefully curated image of a perfect Hollywood family. For Suri, these years formed a childhood unlike any other. Glamour and privilege masked a world of structure, oversight, and discipline, shaping a young girl's environment in ways most could never comprehend. Meanwhile, Katie balanced the dual roles of mother and strategist, quietly maneuvering within a system she did not fully accept, protecting her daughter's future while waiting for the right moment to act. What could finally push a mother to risk everything and break free from a world so tightly controlled? A New Life in New York. June 29, 2012, changed everything. Hollywood froze as the news spread. Katie Holmes had filed for divorce from Tom Cruise, mere days before his milestone 50th birthday. It wasn't just a breakup. This was strategy, protection, and careful calculation all rolled into one. Tom, for all his fame and control, never saw it coming. The announcement hit like a thunderbolt, blindsiding a man accustomed to orchestrating every detail of his life. Katie had spent months moving quietly, deliberately, like someone who understood she was under constant watch. She changed phones, replaced staff she suspected were reporting back to church handlers, and hired new security. Every action was measured, executed like a covert mission. Behind the scenes, her father, Martin Holmes, a sharp, strategic lawyer, served as the architect of her exit. He had helped draft her prenuptial agreement years earlier, a tool that now became the key to her freedom. New York became her battlefield. The state's custody laws offered protection for parents determined to safeguard their child's future, and Katie filed her documents in total secrecy while Tom was in Iceland filming The World, learned of the divorce through headlines before he did. For a man famous for control, the revelation was devastating. Court filings revealed her true motive: protection. Katie sought full custody of Suri, control over her education, medical decisions, and spiritual upbringing. Her fear was not of Tom, but of the powerful systems surrounding him. Former Scientologists later revealed that Katie worried her daughter could be pushed into the organization's strict programs, a future she refused to risk. The legal battle was swift, finalized in just 11 days. Tom agreed to pay approximately $400,000 annually in child support, covering schooling and healthcare money. However, was never her goal. Separation was. Physical distance, legal authority, and spiritual independence were the priorities. Within 24 hours of the settlement, Katie and Suri vanished from Los Angeles, reappearing in Chelsea, New York. Walking hand in hand, unaccompanied by guards or handlers, Katie appeared exhausted, but there was something new in her demeanor, a freedom she had not publicly shown in years. For Suri, it was a fresh start. For Tom, the daughter who had once been the center of his world suddenly existed in a life he no longer controlled. After the divorce, their lives diverged completely. In 2013, during a rare deposition, a lawyer asked Tom a direct question. Had Katie left to protect Suri from Scientology? Though initially offended, Tom admitted it was true, offering the closest acknowledgement he would ever give of the forces that separated him from his daughter. Reports indicated that after a single private visit, Tom's access to Suri ended. No photos, no public appearances, nothing. The father who had carried her down red carpets, called her his miracle, and publicly celebrated her milestones, now existed only in memory. In that quiet absence, a new chapter began, one that was free from the scrutiny of Hollywood and the control of powerful organizations. The world watched from a distance, but behind closed doors, a mother had secured her daughter's life, and Suri stepped into a world carefully chosen for her safety and autonomy. A father in constant motion, a daughter quietly building her own life. How do two lives shaped by the same family legacy drift so completely apart? Reclaiming identity. In the years after the divorce, Tom Cruise immersed himself deeper into his career. Mission: Impossible installments, the long-awaited Top Gun sequel, worldwide tours, and stunts that seemed increasingly impossible kept fans cheering. Every time he jumped from a plane or clung to a speeding aircraft, audiences gasped in awe. But far from those bright lights, his daughter was growing up without him. Katie Holmes quietly rebuilt a stable, grounded life for Suri in New York. She enrolled her in a private Manhattan school, took her to local parks, small cafes, and dance classes. Simple routines that allowed her to experience a childhood as normal as possible. Friends described Suri as bright, warm, and remarkably down-to-earth. Born into celebrity chaos, she was carefully shielded from Hollywood's glare. No red carpets, no flashing cameras, no press. As she entered her teenage years, Suri became a near mirror image of her mother, sharing the same eyes, gentle smile, and quiet strength. Yet, whenever her father's name arose, she would subtly change the subject, moving past it as if instinctively aware of the distance between them. Publicly, Tom never spoke of her again. Privately, insiders confirmed he continued to cover her education and medical expenses. Still, after more than a decade, there were no photos of them together. The man whose mere presence could dominate a movie premiere had somehow failed to rebuild the bridge to his youngest child. By 2021, Suri was stepping fully into her own world. She enrolled at New York's LaGuardia High School of Music and Art and Performing Arts, the same institution that inspired the movie Fame She Sang, acted, directed short films, and began discovering her own creative voice. But it was a decision during her senior year musical that truly signaled her independence. When the program for the Addams Family musical was published, her name appeared not as Suri Cruise but as Siri Noel, adopting her mother's middle name. This was more than a stage choice. It was a statement, a deliberate shift into her own identity. When she graduated in June 2024, her name was boldly listed as Siri Noel. Tom was absent, thousands of miles away at a Taylor Swift concert in London. For those who remembered him proudly carrying his daughter down red carpets in 2006, the contrast was striking. Katie, however, was present, sitting among other parents, clapping and quietly wiping her eyes as her daughter stepped into adulthood. She had guided Siri without Hollywood's armor, without a father beside them, relying solely on her own strength and love. Later that summer, Siri moved to Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh to major in fashion. Katie helped her settle into the dorm, carrying boxes with her own hands. Like any devoted parent, no bodyguards, no media, just a mother and daughter striving to create ordinary moments in a life that had never been ordinary. That fall, Katie returned to her own work, directing a new film called Happy Hours, reuniting with her former Dawson's Creek co-star Joshua Jackson, demonstrating the careful balance she had maintained between her career and her daughter's upbringing. As Siri stepped onto the set, fully herself and unrecognized by most, the contrast between her life and her father's world was striking. From a childhood overshadowed by fame to a young woman forging her own path, one question lingered. Can a daughter truly reclaim her identity when her family legacy looms so large? Independence and reflection. During filming in 2025, Suri visited the set for the first time in years. Now 19, she stood confidently in khaki pants, a white tank top, and red sneakers. There was a calm, composed aura around her, shaped by years of silence and careful distance. Most people didn't even recognize her. She moved differently, carrying herself like someone who had finally claimed her own space. The message was unmistakable. She wasn't living as Tom Cruise's daughter anymore. She was Siri Null, and her independence was no longer a quiet rumor. A few months later, in October 2025, a scene unfolded that captured hearts across social media. Siri was spotted in New York, sitting on a doorstep with her head in her hands, exhausted and lost in thought. Minutes later, Katie arrived in an Uber, sat beside her, and offered quiet comfort. They spoke softly before walking off together toward a nearby bakery. To casual onlookers, it was a simple, tender moment between mother and daughter. To those who understood their story, it was a powerful testament to the bond they had maintained through years of secrecy, pressure, and life-altering choices. At 19, Siri was a college sophomore, fully exploring her interests in fashion and beginning to write her own music. Her creative path was entirely her own, a deliberate departure from the public life she'd been born into. The connection with her father remained distant. Tom continued to provide for her education and health care, but the two had not been photographed together or spoken publicly in more than a decade. The father who had once carried her on red carpets and declared her a miracle now occupied a universe far removed from her daily life. Meanwhile, Tom Cruise pushed further into unprecedented territory, preparing to film scenes in outer space in collaboration with NASA and SpaceX. The man who had dominated Hollywood with blockbuster films now sought to transcend Earth itself. Yet, despite every achievement, the distance between him and his youngest child remained a chasm no career milestone could bridge. Katie, for her part, chose to focus on resilience and gratitude rather than bitterness. She praised Siri as an extraordinary young woman, noting that her greatest pride was witnessing her daughter's strength, independence, and self-assurance bloom. Together, they navigated life away from cameras, away from Hollywood glare, forging a bond that neither fame nor distance could sever. Still, even with her new name, new identity, and growing creative presence, Siri carried a story shaped by love, pressure, and the complex realities of growing up in a world defined by celebrity. For nearly 2 decades, the world had watched their lives unfold like a movie with missing pages, a legendary actor delivering unforgettable performances and a daughter quietly stepping out of his shadow. On the other hand, Tom Cruise has insisted that he has not abandoned his daughter, Suri, either emotionally or physically, despite their limited contact and estrangement. In court documents, he explained that his busy film schedule makes frequent visits difficult, but he maintains a loving relationship with her through regular phone calls. Tom has emphasized that his love for Suri remains strong and that he is not abandoning her in any way. He reportedly calls her daily and describes her as a happy and confident child. Sources close to him also confirm that he's covering her college tuition, fulfilling his financial responsibility. And now, as Siri builds her own life, pursuing her passions and forging her independence, the biggest question lingers. Can the gap between father and daughter ever truly close? Or will some distances remain unbridgeable, no matter what fame or fortune might achieve? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.